Welcome to the Ghosts of Plum Run August Willich Hour with David Dixon, author of the first and only biography of August Willich, entitled Radical Warrior from German Revolutionary to Union General. David, welcome again.
Thanks for having me, Tim. Good to be back.
It's a Ghosts of Plum Run Hour, so you come for the charge that saved America, you stay for the reddest of the red. And that's what we're here for. So couple of housekeeping items. One, we got a comment on the YouTube of this interview from Yogi Repman, no less, who gave us a wunderbar straight A+. So you know you're getting somewhere when Yogi Repman gives you German and an A+. So
I think he must have been into his fourth beer by the time he watched it.
Well, for our listeners and for Jonathan,
yeah, who's this Yogi? Who is this guy?
Yogi Repman is the German immigrant in America who is the foremost. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dave. Foremost champion of 48er history, right?
Yeah, I would say along with Don Tolzmann of Cincinnati, I would say, yeah, those two are probably the German heritage experts.
So shout out to Yogi Repman. Don, you're welcome on the show. Both of you are welcome on the show anytime. Dave, Jonathan came loaded for bear. So
great.
Yeah, I got very excited after our last interview, and I got excellent feedback from all my friends that I sent it to, especially a couple people at the big box retailer I work at. They reacted strongly. I can't imagine why.
I haven't seen that show up in the sales figures yet, Jonathan. You know, you gotta keep pushing that.
I'm working on it. I'm working on promoting your book and Tim's book, because I think both of them are excellent. So we'll get that.
So you get the first question, Jonathan, because you said you got all sorts of shit lined up. So go for it.
I got a lot of questions to ask.
You want me to ask the first question?
No, I would love, because we only mentioned this in passing in the last episode, and literally just a sentence. And a guy at Home Depot came up to me. I won't say his name, but he's just like, how did you just gloss over this in one sentence? So we need the whole story from you, David. We need you to give us the detail. What the heck happened between Willich, Karl Marx, and Willich's life? The whole story.
This apparently is the sticky part of August Willich's life. This is what the masses want to hear about. So yeah.
It always comes down to sex, drugs, and rock and roll, doesn't it?
That's correct.
I mean, no matter what.
Yeah, there's nobody more rock and roll in Civil War than August Willich. So.
Yeah. Well, briefly, as the story goes, which is corroborated by a couple of other sources, including Jenny Marx herself. She's really responsible for the quote in the book. So, Willich was a rather flamboyant individual. So he, I guess, in this one instance, in this one particular point in time, had romantic designs on Marx's wife. So he would, when Marx would, yeah, I mean, so Willich, when he wasn't with his friends making brooms or trying other schemes to eke out a living, he would go and visit Jenny in the Marx apartment while Marx was off in the British Library formulating his theories.
What year was this? We're about to
this would have been the first half of 1850.
Okay.
So Willich arrives in London near the tail end of 1849, and he's immediately welcomed into the circle of Marx and Engels and the rest of the members of the Communist League, as well as the the French League of the Just, the Workers' Society. There's various societies that that embrace him because he's more or less a folk hero. So they welcome him into the society, and Willich is takes advantage, I think, of the situation by cozying up to Jenny Marks, and as she says, I think the quote was he was trying to coax the worm out that lives in every marriage. In other words,
oh dear, we can't have that.
Yeah.
He's
So,
coaxing the worm. He's coaxing the worm.
yes.
So what exactly do you think was coaxing the worm? I mean, what was was it like a full-on love triangle, or was she really
No,
kind of pushing him off?
well, since I'm a historian and not a romance novelist, I
Not
would.
all of us are, Dave.
And I haven't written the script for Netflix yet, in which I can take all kinds of liberties, like they're doing on The Crown, for example. I have to stick with the facts. So all I know is that he would have a habit, and Jenny Marks was quite an intelligent woman, and may not have been the brilliant philosopher that Carl was, but certainly she was very well informed and had opinions. So these women and men would have long conversations into the night on political philosophy and how to solve what they called the social question. So he would be in the habit of visiting her when Carl was not around, since he and Carl didn't get along too well, and in those instances, due to what I think Tim feels is his repressed sexuality, I guess he would make advances, and she came to probably dislike.
He's like prancing around like a peacock or something.
Yeah, that's basically what Jenny said. He would come in dressed in his to the nines in his revolutionary costume, which would be a red sash around his waist, and very much of a cavalier type of get up, if you will. And that was his.
He's like Cary Grant or something, He's like he's just this very style. He sounds very style conscious.
Right. Well, and he was a tall man. He was 6'1" or 6'2" probably at that time. So he was a tall, handsome, rugged.
Did he have his
military man
flowing hair still at that time, or?
We don't have a photograph of him at that time. So we have drawings, and the drawings show him with long red hair and a long red beard. So I guess we have to take it as an article of faith that those drawings were fairly accurate, and they are pretty consistent. So if you see drawings of those revolutionary figures at that time, because you've got to remember, this is very, very early in photography, right? Photography really doesn't start getting going until like 1845, 1846. So, and it's expensive. So he certainly can't afford to have photographs of himself. So yeah, that we see him with the Hecker hat. This is this large fedora that he would wear, usually with a feather in it. So
walk into Jenny's bedroom with that hat on.
Right.
He sounds like a French cavalier or something.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, and like I said, Hecker was.
How did the lid get blown off of this thing? Like, did she say something to Marks, or did Marks walk in like a soap opera scene where he walks in on him or something?
No, I don't know of anything like that. I mean, all I know is that Jenny would comment on that fact, and so I had to presume that in addition to their philosophical differences were some of the reasons why they developed a mutual hate for each other.
And the night of the duel, or how did the duel occur? Like, who threw the glove down or whatever?
No, that's a great question, because there's a lot of stuff on Wikipedia and other sources that don't get this right, and I spent a lot of time making sure I got it right. So here's where I came out based on the evidence and based on what people said. So they're having these meetings of the Communist League, and as I explained in your last program, the Marx and Willich are moving further and further apart philosophically, right? Willich is still auguring for immediate violent revolution. Marx has already pretty quickly gone over to the fact that, hey, this is going to be a long, drawn out struggle, which is going to go through many stages of economic development. So this is one of the things, in addition to the affair, that is tearing these two apart, right? So they get to the meeting, and I think I may have mentioned this last time, but they're at the meeting of the Communist League. These meetings tend to get very heated. Marx, personality-wise, will launch into these violent character assassinations of anyone who disagrees with him in any way. So this was, Marx felt like this was his baby, and if people didn't understand it the way he understood it, then they must be idiots. So
us leftists wouldn't know anything about that.
Right, that
Yeah.
basically describes every leftist on Twitter.
Every
Exactly.
DSA meeting, every.
Right. Yeah, I've been watching those Twitter fights pretty actively. So anyway, so it gets more and more heated, and at one point, Marx calls Willich an uneducated, 4 times cuckolded jackass.
Now, that's nice. I mean, that is beautiful.
That is the point where August Willich loses his cool. So what we know is that, and this is where people get it wrong. People say, oh, Willich challenged Marx to a duel. Never happened. Willich is about to challenge Marx to a duel. And Marx's acolytes know that Marx is a thinker, not a fighter, right? Marx would never respond to this. So in order, in my opinion, to preserve Marx's honor, one of his young acolytes, a man by the name of Konrad Schramm, challenges Willich before Willich has a chance to either slap Marx or throw his glove down or whatever, whatever he decides to do.
Beats Willich to the punch.
Yeah, Schramm beats Willich to the punch, right? Really, really stupid move on Schramm's
I mean, what's
part.
this guy thinking? What the hell is this guy thinking?
Because Schramm so the way that the Irish code duello, which governs duels between gentlemen, even though frankly it's illegal in England by this time, but they still abide by the Irish code duello, and the Irish code duello says that the person who is challenged is the person that gets the choice of weapons.
On that note, I'm going to have a shot of Jameson.
Excellent. So Willich, of course, is not only an expert swordsman, an expert horseman, but he's also an expert shot. And the legend goes that he can shoot the middle out of the ace of spades at 30 paces. So he's a crack shot, and Schramm, the man who's challenging him, has never shot a pistol in his life. There you go.
Irish rules, baby.
By the way, I'm joining Tim with the Irish here.
Oh, you got Jameson too? I get Jameson too.
We got Jameson.
This could get out of hand really fast, like that meeting of the Communist League.
That's exactly where we're headed. So
we won't be calling you a 4-time cuckolded jackass.
Yeah, a 4-time. How did he get 4 times? Like, who cuckold? How did Marx add up 4 times cuckolded?
Well, I think there's some evidence to support Marx's insult, honestly. So
really,
yes, really,
you gotta hear this.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, you want me to finish the duel story, or you want me to go to the cuckold, and then we'll get back to the cuckolded jackass? Okay, great.
Yes.
Staying on the duel story, we'll go back to the cuckold. So
there are so many gems. Oh my God, so many gems.
Schramm, like a Twitter reply guy, just goes, "I'll take care of this, my hero," and throws down his glove. And then what?
So then, since dueling is illegal in England
Right.
at this time,
Right.
they go across the channel to Belgium where they conduct the duel, and Willich, they have seconds that come over right for them and hold the weapons and do all the things the seconds do in a duel. And Willich's second is Emmanuel Bartholomew, who is an assassin really by trade, and really an anarchist by
Around,
politics.
right? He brings
Right.
the baddest ass he could bring.
Exactly right. Exactly right. In fact, Bartholomew, just so happens, had also arranged his own duel before the Willich duel, but Bartholomew's opponent never shows. So they have the duel. So first they set up the duel, and of course Willich assumes his position first. How does he assume his position? He assumes his position in such a way that Schramm, who doesn't know what he's doing with the pistol, is also looking into the sun as he's facing Willich.
The man thought every single thing through here, right?
So they pace it off, they turn, and of course Willich is just going to wait for Schramm to fire at him, and he does, right. and of course Schramm misses badly, and then Willich fires and wounds Schramm in the head.
So the question is,
Schramm,
did he try to kill him, or did he just try to graze him?
We're not sure. We're not sure. I mean, he's such an expert shot, but right. That would be pretty difficult to shoot a man in the head with the intention of just grazing him. But in any case, he does. So Schramm wakes up about an hour later on the beach in Belgium, and with his second, and Willich has already left the scene, and Bartholomew have already gone. So the end of that story is that Bartholomew, a couple of days later, shows up at the Marx's door, and Jenny Marx opens the door. Carl is not there that night. He's probably off with the housekeeper, right? So, so Jenny answers the door, and Bartholomew, who's a Frenchman, says, Schramm, I'm going to butcher the French. Schramm donne un bullet à la tête, or something like that. So Schramm has a bullet in the head. And Jenny just about faints, and then Schramm, marches off and leaves. A couple days later, they get another knock on the door, and it's Schramm, and his head is bandaged, and he's obviously survived this duel. So that's the story of the duel.
Did the bullet exit? Like, what happened? Did it just graze? Like,
all we have are the reports from the people that were there. So, I mean, it from what we understand, it grazed him, but it hit him hard enough to knock him unconscious for an hour or two.
Wow, that is insane.
So this will go.
Yeah.
This will go miles across Home Depot. This story now, because
yeah, exactly.
It's the Home Depot guy that wants to know about the duel.
Yeah. So before we get into some of the things I want to talk about, which is the political philosophy, let's get back to the cuckolded jackass story, because I think
we have one more human interest story to get through.
Okay. All right. So real briefly, then, the cuckolded jackass story, I feel, comes from several sources. So, when Willich goes over there to England, of course, he's destitute. He's living in military-style barracks with these artisans, these tailors and shoemakers, etc. So he first tries to go out and make a living by teaching German. That doesn't go very well, and then then they start making brooms as a way to try to at least get enough money to eat. That also doesn't go particularly well. So Willich is cozying up to anyone he can to try to make ends meet. So there's several comments in Marx's writings about Willich tumbling his landlady in order to make ends meet.
There's that.
Yeah, he also makes carnal advances on a baroness who, by the way, this Baroness was the woman who supplied the bribe money for Karl Schurz when Karl Schurz escaped Spandau in Germany during the revolution.
Well,
So
all these 48ers are all just fucking their way out of the situation.
yeah, I mean, he's using all the tools in his arsenal, isn't he? Yeah.
They're all just trying to anything they can to get out of the situation. And man, so
yeah, so I think 4 times cuckolded is probably there. You know, he probably did have a number of these relationships with women that were serving his financial needs.
Of course, you know, Marx would say, because he's got a relationship with the kid whose daddy owns a fucking cotton mill and who's tossing him money just because they're buddies. You know, I mean, sure,
Right.
we all like to have that. You know, that
Karl Marx is not innocent in any of this.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
Karl Marx, this is why it's such an interesting dynamic between them, is for every, you know, bad character trait in Willich, you can notice, like, the same one is reflected in Marx, and he's just being a complete hypocrite about it. And it usually works, because at least Willich didn't, you know, have a kid with somebody. Like, I'm pretty sure Marx knocked up the housekeeper, correct?
That's the general
I mean, they're all
consensus.
fucking around. And it all ends up on Twitter, right? And then they're all like yelling at each other about it.
Yeah, but Willich is always like the romantic, you know. He seems to be this romantic figure, you know, and the seducer or whatnot. And then you got Marx, which is, he's kind of like the backstabbing type of character. Genius, you know, when it came to political philosophy and everything, but as like moral character as a person, Willich was, you know, I feel like ahead of him on that. I don't know. Yeah.
certainly Willich likes to portray himself as a morally pure stoic. So that's his self-image. And
that's a good segue. Let me interrupt you there. We're going to get to that.
Sure, absolutely.
Let's get to that political thing through this.
Okay.
Schleiermacher helped raise Willich.
I wanted to ask about this too.
And nobody knows who Schleiermacher is. I didn't know who Schleiermacher was until Yogi Rutman. Hopefully you're still watching, Yogi. When Yogi explained to me that the most incredible thing to him about Willich's childhood was being raised by Schleiermacher. So explain to the viewers, listeners, who was Friedrich Schleiermacher?
Yeah, well, I think there's still quite a bit of research and mystery around this Schleiermacher issue. So, but we have enough to validate these stories that have been coming down and have been consistent through all the different biographies of Willich. And when I say biographies, I mean the small little encapsulated biographies in different newspapers and such. So, but the one unproven rumor about Willich is that he was the bastard son of the brother of Friedrich William of Prussia, who eventually became the Kaiser. So, and there is some evidence, but only circumstantial evidence that this is true. However, where I think that evidence kind of points in that direction is that you have 2 orphan brothers, right? So Willich is 3 years old and his brother is 5 or 6 years old when their military hero father dies. And so the mother has to give these children up for adoption. The older brother goes and lives with an uncle who is a military veteran and gets raised in the traditional way and becomes a loyal Prussian military officer for life. Willich, on the other hand, why is Willich placed with this aunt who marries Schleiermacher? Why? We don't know, but there is a very strong connection between Schleiermacher and the man that could have possibly been Willich's birth father, who is Prince August of Prussia. Prince August is a lifelong bachelor, noted raconteur. I mean, this guy had all kinds of affairs in his life. So, and perhaps, and again, this is speculation, but it's somewhat founded that perhaps August Willich was named after Prince August. Anyway,
Well, they got the same name, so.
well, and when you examine Schleiermacher's day books,
Right.
which have been transcribed, Schleiermacher and Prince August are meeting during this time that Willich's childhood. They're meeting almost every week. So at the very least, they're very close friends. So there is a connection. So Willich lives with Schleiermacher's sister part of this time, and lives with his Schleiermacher's sister and the philosopher in his stately home on essentially the campus of the University of Berlin.
He's like 4 years old at this point.
Yeah, he stays there from 4 until he's 12 or 13 when he goes off to military school.
So for 8 years, he's being raised by Schleiermacher, basically.
Yeah, and so Schleiermacher, the people that know philosophy really know Schleiermacher, because he's called by,
or Willich drank Hofbrau.
I doubt it. No, I don't think so.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking that way.
Especially not Schleiermacher. Schleiermacher, I don't know this for a fact, but Schleiermacher probably didn't drink. But in any case, so Schleiermacher has been called the father of German liberal theology. So Schleiermacher, at certain points in his life, was being accused as being, for example, a closeted Republican. He was pushing, for example, for the Reformed Protestant Church to make its own decisions around liturgy and how they operated, versus being following the dictates of the king. So there is a considerable amount of political tension between Schleiermacher and the Prussian regime, and of course.
So what do you think August took from that as a little kid? He's 6, 7, 8 years old. What do you think he took from that?
Well, Schleiermacher, for example, had a real strong philosophy of children as individuals, and building critical thinking and treating children almost in a way as adults worthy of being listened to. So I think what Willich took away from that was the importance of critical thinking, the importance of being an independent thinker, which he certainly was, and the desire to question everything. Because even Schleiermacher in his childhood had questioned the existence of God, for example, at one point, which is a pretty radical thing to do when you're an aspiring minister. So, and this shows up as Willich leaves Schleiermacher's household and goes into the Prussian military and starts to interact with these other liberal-minded fellow officers. They start reading people like, especially Ludwig Feuerbach, right? So Feuerbach's basic philosophy is that religion alienates man from his true essence, right? So where should you find God? You should really find God inside yourself or in nature, not as some external, all-powerful mystical being. So this puts Willich on the path towards eventually becoming an atheist, which is my conclusion, that where he was as a mature man. So he takes this concept of religious alienation from Feuerbach, and then he tacks on this true socialism, this idealism from people like Moses Hess, Moses Hess is the famous Zionist later, but at this point, Moses Hess is one of the early architects of communism, and really a strong influencer of Marx before Marx of course, in his own mind, feels like he moves way beyond Moses Hess, and eventually
Well,
starts
As
tearing down
always.
moves
Moses
beyond
Hess.
one at some point.
Of course, yeah, of course,
Marx
Yeah.
is always the smartest person in the
Right,
room, according
right.
to Marx.
Right.
absolutely.
He is.
So
And he has a little bit of, he has a little bit of legitimacy to that claim. I mean, at some point, you just have to,
definitely.
you just have to give him what he's due.
Yeah, you have to move. I mean, most people might say that you really eventually at some point have to move off this romantic idea of French utopian socialism and get into something a little more realistic, a little more achievable in the short term, at least in the next couple hundred years, right?
So,
Yeah.
so what would you like to say about all of that? Because you mentioned to me when we talked about this, you're like, one of the things you wanted to ask about or talk about was what is the challenges for the left that you can learn from Willich's biography? Like what do you
Right.
learn about the left from Willich?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, I think it's really interesting how his philosophy evolved over time, right? So as I said in the first interview, I think he always has the end game in mind. The end game is a communist or socialist, if you will, state at some point, right?
Right.
But how he gets there and how he develops his ideas initially from this true socialism, this utopian socialism with immediate violent revolution, drastic social reengineering, a proletariat revolution from the ground up. Then he moves to America, and that strategy changes, right? Because they've already had this bourgeois revolution that they tried to affect in Germany, in the German states, had already happened in America, right? This has already happened. So the bourgeois revolution has happened. Now, what's the next step in developing a more perfect form of Republican popular government? And that next step for Willich is a workers' republic. And so what I would like to hear from you guys is where I come out on Willich when his ideas are fully baked is he ends up really being more in this anarcho-syndicalist area, right? Or libertarian Marxism, some people would call it, right? So a true workers' republic.
Well, you make this point regularly, and I applaud you for it. There's no such thing as a Marxist in August Willich's time.
That's right. That's right.
So we cannot call him an anarcho-syndicalist, whatever.
Right.
I think we got to call August Willich something completely original, because for a million reasons. But the first reason is he's American, and he's a Union general. So I
And a
don't care what
German
you got to
immigrant on
say
top of it.
about Lenin and Stalin and all the rest of them dudes, Trotsky, everything. The only communist, straight communist who had any effect on American history at any level is August Willich. So you got to start there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
you got to treat August Willich as a separate philosophical, political theorist way, because what he did was with his own hands. I mean, he went out there and he did the deed. So I would be curious, Jonathan, what do you think?
Well, I think what David's getting at is the shift from revolutionary politics necessarily to electoral politics. Once you have a bourgeoisie republic, as you mentioned before, established. And there's no doubt he did that later in life, but still, he also viewed the Civil War as a revolutionary war in and of itself.
Right,
correct?
Right.
So it's like he transitions it's not so much his strategy transitions, I feel, like his vision, but his tactics to getting there. And I think there's points to where that's smarter. That's him analyzing the material conditions and, you know, working towards a more realistic conclusion, especially with the Workers' Republic and organizing, you know, labor. That's something that this country, unfortunately, you know, didn't do as well as some of the European countries. And we're seeing the results now with the social programs eroding here, whereas they're a lot stronger in Europe and whatnot. But as far as like the modern day left, what we can garner from that, I'm still a little bit up in air on, just because we tried it in 2016, 2020, you know, the social democratic, you know, process of electoralism, and it failed with the Bernie campaign. And I don't want to get too hung up on that, but
Dave, that's a whole nother series. I mean, that's
yes. But what I'm trying to bring up with that is that whatever happens needs to be from the Willich's frame of workers and labor, and it being from the roots up and not from the top down. It's not going to come from a presidential campaign or an electoral strategy per se. It's going to come from people getting into these communities like Willich was doing pre-war. And it seems like he strayed away from that a little bit after the Civil War, which I would love to hear more about.
Yeah, he got sucked right in, man. He got sucked right into that machine.
Yeah, but it's going to have to come from labor in some way. And I think he was dead on when he got to Cincinnati and started doing these African-American German marches and stuff and getting involved with the immigrant community and the color community. Like, that is the future of the left, this class dynamic. And it also brings me to this point that I really wanted to touch on, and it comes with Willich a little bit, but it ties into the narrative of the Civil War that you were articulating last time. And that's that you mentioned the religious fundamentalists in New England as the main driver of abolition at the beginning. Your John Brown types loosely, you know, who saw it as a moral question. But what I garnered from you, and what I also garnered from the pitch Willich was constantly making to his soldiers, you know, the people he was propagandizing and rallying to his banner, was that it had to be material class based. It had to be this chattel slavery as a tool of the capital elite. So if you could touch more on that, because that's the frame it needs to be on the left, is strip out the moral questions. Moral questions do matter. And like you said, a lot of the Germans saw slavery as immoral, but it was the material class-based interest of tying the material conditions of African-American slaves and the German immigrants together, and the Irish immigrants too. That's a whole nother one, and the Italian immigrants and all these guys, that led to the Union Army being 50% immigrant.
50% immigrant and 50. You said the number you cited was half the Union Army was immigrant or liberated slave by the end.
Immigrants or U.S. colored troops, which are black soldiers. So either freed slaves or free blacks in the North who joined the Union Army.
And I guess I mean, if I could maybe just boil it down for what Jonathan just said, is Willich is the first figure of the left who lived that life. That multiracial, background class struggle.
He tied all of these strands together, and it was on a material class-based interest instead of framing it as a moral argument of you're for this or you're against that, therefore you're a bad person. And that's what the left falls into, in my opinion, a lot these days, is cancel culture nonsense and whatnot. Is if you're, you know, pro-abortion or against abortion, you're bad or an evil, or you're good, or whatever. Willich kind of smashes through all that. Like, he formed, this is another thing I wanted to ask, is his relationship with the religious community in Cincinnati, because he forms these bonds with people he disagrees with, it seems, religiously, but he does it to the ends of trying to unite workers. And that's the type of frame we need, in my opinion. Could you elaborate more on that? And
Yeah, sure.
sorry.
I think there is, I think ultimately there's a practical politics involved here. And Willich is certainly, he's not an anarchist, right? So Willich believes, and at one point he says that, you know, how we're going to get this done initially is we're going to go through the halls of Congress. Eventually, we're going to get rid of Congress, and this country is going to be run by labor unions. But in the transitional period, this is how we've got to get things done. So even though at this point he does not believe in God, he's forming alliances, as you said, with Moncure Conway, for example, who is a really liberal Unitarian preacher who, like Willich in his childhood, he questions the existence of God. He doesn't say God doesn't exist, but he says, hey, you have to think critically about this. And so I think there is, he makes some compromises, right? So, and Tim mentioned after the war, I mean, he makes some big compromises. So he comes back.
Yeah.
So, well, to rewind just a little bit, they have the revolution. And so in a lot of people's minds, hey, they've passed these three amendments. They've defeated the slave holding oligarchy in the South. And the big criticisms of Germans in the German leaders like Willich in the post-war period is that they pretty much abandon the cause of the newly freed slaves and the blacks, and they move on.
Yeah, they all stopped giving the slightest care. I mean, and Willich is one of them, because that gig in Hamilton County at the time was the biggest gravy train available to anyone. And
biggest mistake of his life, really.
Yeah, and anything anyone who has the Civil War record at the time that he had was going to get elected to whatever he wanted.
Exactly.
And he got elected to the most corrupt bullshit. like you can't even imagine. Like, what describe the office that August Willich was elected to.
Sure. So he was elected to on the Republican ticket as a, and this is the only time I think he ever really affiliated himself with one of the two political parties. So he's elected on a Republican ticket to the post of Hamilton County Auditor. He does this very reluctantly, but his friends tell him, hey, look, it's embarrassing to have you, one of our military heroes, living in such poverty, which frankly he did for his whole adult life willingly, even after he had thousands. He had a fortune after this auditor job, and he still lived in poverty, gave most of that money away, did have some friends invest it, but so that really wasn't the driving force behind his decision. His friends cajoled him into taking this role. He showed no interest in this role. So besides it being a corrupt position, he also was guilty of.
Describe for our listeners what the corruption is in an elected auditor position at the county level in the 1860s, because that was the most corrupt shit ever.
Yeah. So basically here's the deal. So they were charged with assessing taxes on the different properties in the county. And so the deal was that after the properties they added to the assessor roll above a certain amount of collections, anything above and beyond that, the auditor would keep for himself.
Right. And the theory behind this was?
The theory behind it was that basically if if it wasn't for them investigating these tax cheats, then the state wouldn't get the money anyway. So it's, so
what they did was
if
incentivize it as a profit incentive in an elected position. An elected position was given
Right.
profit incentive, literally.
which is not that unusual at the time. In fact, his three predecessors had operated the office the same way, and his successor had operated the office the same
So
way.
August Willich goes after fucking doing all of this shit, shooting Marx's buddy in the head and all of this shit, hitting on Marx's wife. He ends up elected himself into a position where he gets a cut. And the whole
it's
point of
terrible.
the position is he gets a cut. The whole point
It's
of the
terrible.
position is he gets a cut. So I
Right.
can imagine this had quite an effect on him as he aged. I mean,
I think it did, and certainly if you read the newspaper reports and you read his critics, who are really full of venom and spite against him in the papers, he waits till this dies down, and that's when he takes his trip over to Europe in 1870, just before the Franco-Prussian War breaks out. So, yeah, I mean, I think he certainly lost some all of his political capital and some of his reputation by making this ill-advised move into politics. And I think in some ways he tried to repair that after the war. For example, when he joins the Liberal Republicans in opposing Grant in 1872, that of course is a fiasco. But then in 1873, when he tries to form this proto-socialist party, this People's Party, he comes out, for example, with this long speech against his former political benefactor, Oliver P. Morton, who was the governor of Indiana. And that shocked a lot of people. But basically, he was saying that, hey, Morton is just pandering to the special interests, and special interest politics was one of the reasons he felt like eventually America was going to go down the tubes, because this domination of monopolies and corporate special interests works against the it's a sham. It's a cover to line rich industrialists' pockets versus real legislation that benefits the people. So, but he never really regained that political capital, like you said, Tim, that he spent so ill-advisedly on taking this position. And could he have been more influential? I don't know. I mean, the radical Republicans were running the show, right? I mean, there was very little effective political opposition until you get into the late 1870s, and Willich is dead in 1878. So, I'm not sure what he could have done with that proto-socialist party platform that he was developing.
what do you think are the lessons? What do you think are the lessons?
Well, can I ask you this real quick?
Sure.
During this post-war period, what was his deal with labor? It seems like he completely dropped a lot of the labor activism he was doing before the war. Is that true?
Yeah, it's hard to say, because there are some black holes in the sources, right? So unfortunately, we have some speeches of his so I don't think he really changes his political philosophy. If anything, I think he is probably more anti-establishment after the war than he was before the war, because after that fiasco with the auditor position, like I said, he comes out stumping for this socialist workers' party, if you will. So I mean, I think he becomes a little more committed to it, but he's lost all his capital. He can't really.
Not as
he's not.
active, it seems.
Yeah. So and the other, like I said, the other problem is we don't have as much, since we don't have a collection of his personal papers. Unfortunately, in some ways, the 1870s are a bit of a dark hole for us from a primary source standpoint, and that's unfortunate. For example, we don't know how he reacted to the events in Paris, the Paris Commune, and
Oh my God, that would have been amazing to hear
I
about.
was looking for that. I was waiting for that in the book.
We were Felix and I, and Felix is probably still searching for it as he finishes his dissertation. But I'm telling you, we were desperate to know. We're also desperate to know how he reacted to the Great Railroad Strike in 1877. We don't know.
What's that?
When are we getting Felix on the show?
Well, we'll work on that.
Are we working on that? Are we actually working on that?
Yeah, we'll work on it. I need to find out what his schedule is. Yeah.
Good.
Well, what's this Great Railroad Strike? I've never heard of this. What is this?
Yeah, so there was a big railroad strike in 1877. There was a lot of you had a financial panic going on. The financial panic, I'm sure Tim's familiar with it. 1877. There was a lot of pushback against hobos, people riding the rails. There was a lot of unemployed people, and
Village never. You have nothing on Village from that.
I have nothing on it, unfortunately. I think Mike, here's where I draw this conclusion. So he moves to St. Mary's, right, in around 1874-ish. He actually spends a few months in Cleveland. I don't know if you knew that, but I didn't put that in the book.
All right.
But
I didn't know that because it wasn't in your book.
Yeah, I know. But
so expand on that, please, for the Cleveland.
Yeah. So, well, he just all we know is he would go to Cleveland from time to time after the war for water treatments on his arm. So there was some type of hydraulic treatment, some type of, probably a spa or of some sort. Maybe there were spas in Cleveland at that time. I'm not sure, but he would
the Schwitz. You ever hear of the Schwitz?
No.
Okay, so the Schwitz is the oldest Jewish spa in the entire city.
Okay.
It's on the east side and it still exists. It's like 90 years old, and you can go in there, and it's got the oldest running fire. The longest running fire in the entire city of Cleveland is the Schwitz, because that fire has been going on. It's like a sauna. It's one of these Russian saunas. No, he didn't go to the Schwitz because it was. I mean, the Schwitz is like from 1930, 1920.
Okay.
But so he came here for the waters. He came to Cleveland.
He came. It appears that either he was going there to take waters, like mineral water treatments, or he was going to some type of spa. But the newspaper reports call it water treatments. So that's all.
You know where he stayed?
All I know about that. No idea. No, it
Reminds
never
me of
seemed to be.
Gandhi did some similar stuff with water therapy as well. It seemed to be kind of like a pseudoscience of the era.
Yeah, we're careful because that's a whole nother. I mean,
Gandhi, don't get us started on Gandhi.
Don't get me started on Gandhi, because then it's a whole nother. It's a year. That is a year long, every week. All three of us.
So the railroad strike of this time period.
Yeah. So since we have nothing from Village, for example, I looked into Carl Schurz, and it was, frankly, pretty disappointing. Carl Schurz, for example, his as the most famous German American of that time, and a revolutionary comrade of Village, Carl Schurz is very much taking a conservative anti-striker position on this. So by this time, Schurz has spent so much time in government that he has really become a force against reform at this point. I'm sorry to say, and there'll probably be people that are going to disagree with me, but it's clear that Schurz is aligned with some of the other conservatives that feel like it's more important to avoid violent strikes and all the upheaval that come with labor agitation. It's more important to contain that than it is to really advocate for meaningful reform. So, Schurz is co-opted. So I guess the good news is Willich only spent 2 years in the auditor role and got out of it, but Schurz became, Secretary of State.
Here's the thing.
Secretary of State in
Secretary of State.
1848, correct?
Here's the left.
Yes.
Here's the leftist response to that from the 21st century is that the system tried to co-opt Willich to completely kill his credibility. Because
yeah, I guess you could position it that way.
Yeah, you're gonna put Carl Schurz and all these other guys up there to spit down on the railroad strikers, and August Willich is going to look like this buffoon. And if he opens his mouth, because he just spent these years in the auditor's position, sucking from the teat, and
right.
So that's the end of Willich's credibility on the left, really.
It is. It really is. It really is. Unfortunately, yeah. So I think those, like I said before, I think some of those ideas that he had resurfaced later. Daniel De Leon, for example, right? So I think if you take people like that in the turn of the 19th century, there's a lot more the timing is better, and there's a lot more momentum towards this whole idea of strong labor unions and potentially labor unions running the show, having a true cooperative commonwealth, getting rid of wages, for example. All of those things that were seriously discussed starting, say, in the late 1890s through the say the 1920s or so. Timing has a lot to do with this. So I think lessons that you can learn, I think, from Willich. Number one is that anytime, if you're a radical, you sometimes you have to wait a long time to see really meaningful change. You can come up with these things, and Willich, it took a long time for Willich to learn, if this is a lesson to learn, that maybe you should try to achieve some incremental change rather than going for the whole shebang all the time. For example, when Willich resigns his position as editor of the Cincinnati Republicaner, and he does this just 2 weeks before the Civil War breaks out, the dispute is really over this incrementalism, right? So people like Wiedemeyer in New York, Joseph Wiedemeyer, are basically saying, hey, look, we got to grab what we can grab right now, and what we can grab is the 10-hour day, and eventually, right, the 8-hour day. But we grab the 10-hour day. There's certain benefits that we can augur for. We can do these strikes. We can try to raise wages a little bit, and Willich eventually gets fed up with it and just says, no, this is too much compromise. We need a wholesale restructuring.
Willich was right. He was right at every step of the way. And not only that, he took one of the questions I had, actually, that I wanted to bring up last time, which I didn't. Do you have any descriptions of Willich killing someone?
Personally, no.
With his own hands?
No.
See, Tim brought this up with
I do not.
and I found it fascinating too. What
is going through August Willich's mind when he's killing someone on the battlefield, which he has to have done, right? He has to have killed someone on the battlefield.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have so little. Either he didn't write a lot of personal letters. He wrote a few. We have a few during the war. None of them really address the events on on the battlefield.
He never talks about the heat of battle, really.
Yeah, when he's writing his friends, actually, when he's writing his friend Anarchy in 1862, you would think that that letter would be full of things about the war. It's really nothing about the war. He's talking about the worker revolution he wants to lead in Germany after this war is over. So
yeah, whatever, this is going on, but I'll see you guys in Berlin,
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, unfortunately, we really don't know. I mean, we certainly know how he was trained, and you can read in the early chapters about the things that the Prussian military schools did to exact discipline, to harden their prospective soldiers by doing all kinds of minor torture to them to try to harden them up and make sure they can survive anything. So certainly those Prussian officers come out of that experience with a certain fearlessness, let's say, that Willich and other German American officers have displayed on the battlefield. But as far as his personal thoughts, unfortunately, we don't have any quotes like we do from Sherman or from Grant, where famous quotes about war being hell, or those type of quotes. We just don't have them.
The best quote is when he gets out of the prison and he gives that speech.
We haven't even talked about the prison. Oh my God, the prison! I wanted to bring this up too.
We're gonna end the show. We're gonna end the show on something completely different, because Jonathan, one of the first things Jonathan said to me about we missed this, we missed that on the last one. By the way, how often do you want to do this? How often do you feel like doing this? Because we'll do it whenever you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as we cover, perhaps different topics, so your audience doesn't.
We got tropical flower yet, okay? So we haven't got the tropical flower, so we got a long way to go. Well,
once you see the viewer numbers start trailing off with each episode, you'll know it's probably time to move on to something else.
I'll tell you what,
Tim,
this has been only up a week, and the emerging Civil War interview that you did was up 6 months ago, and we're about to get more than them. So,
like we said,
it's going to be just fine. It's going to be just fine. Yeah. So, here's my question. The Lincoln meeting in the White House.
Oh my God.
So he meets the fucking president of the United States, and none of us know about any of this. Okay, so
is this in the Oval Office here? Like, set the complete scene, the whole story, everything you know about this.
Go. The whole thing, just go.
We got to know everything.
Yeah. Okay. So Willich gets released from Libby Prison in Richmond, one of the most notorious prisons in the Confederacy. Makes his way by steamboat up to Washington, D.C., and where he expects to meet with the key people in the administration.
He's
right.
Like,
so
I'm talking to your low ass,
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, he tries to get a meeting with different people, and nobody wants to meet with him. So we don't know exactly who he was trying to get a meeting with, but you would suggest he's trying to meet with Secretary of War Stanton, for example. Perhaps he's trying to meet with Winfield Scott or some of the other high-ranking officers in the U.S. Army. But he doesn't seem to be able to get anyone's attention until he goes to Lincoln. And
do you think
Lincoln
that's because of anti-German immigrant sentiment? Like, why is that?
I think it's because we're in the middle of a cataclysmic war here, and everybody's really busy.
Lincoln. Everybody wants to see Lincoln, and
everybody wants to see. And Lincoln is historically is very generous in terms of wanting to talk to people who request an audience with him. So in the 19th century, it's a lot easier just to walk up to the White House and request an audience with the president. I'm not saying everybody gets it, but
Right.
as a private citizen. And of course they had a little bit of a history, right? So when Lincoln is on his way to Washington,
Right.
he stops in Cincinnati, and Willich has prepared a speech, and so there is some interaction between the two. Willich has also been recommended and for promotion, and there is some correspondence from Lincoln saying he supports Willich. So certainly Lincoln is familiar with Willich, and they've had some interaction. So he goes to Washington to try to give his impressions of his time in prison, not only in Libby prison in Richmond, but also on his way through the South. He's imprisoned in Atlanta for several weeks,
Right, he's on
and
a
then
tour
makes
for
his.
a while.
We'll find out.
So yeah, we can handle this, Jonathan. Tim's gone black. So he's gone dark on us. So
I'm back.
So
I'm back. I'm back. I'm
All
back.
right.
I'm back.
All right. So he sits with Lincoln, and Lincoln is very interested to hear the impressions from Willich. Willich is the highest ranking officer at that time who was imprisoned in Libby. So Willich describes the condition of the South, and he says some pretty interesting things to Lincoln. For example, he says that from his observation, that the South is a graveyard of walking corpses. You have.
What did he mean by that?
Well, one of the things he meant is there's so much, there's so little food down there. There's the poor white people. The poor white people have been forced into the Confederate Army against their wishes. They're deserting like crazy. He met a couple of enslaved people down there that tried to explain how the
So
Southern
gave Lincoln the speech that he gave in Cincinnati out of prison, right? Because
I think more than that. He's basically saying, look, the poor whites in the South have been deluded and are being forced against their will into the Confederate Army, and they're deserting by the thousands, which is a fact.
And he said this to Lincoln.
Oh my God! He says
this to Lincoln. And then he said, but since he had spent so much time in Richmond, he basically said, look, Richmond is practically defenseless. He said, there's some old men here, but I mean, meanwhile, he's got McClellan, and McClellan's being very cautious about whether or not he thinks he's got yeah, exactly. So in the one ear, McClellan's telling him that there's like, I need 100,000 more men, and meanwhile, Willich is telling him, look, this thing it's here for the taking, man. All you have to do is you just march right in there. And so
Willich is like, yeah, this is over, dude.
Now that's historically accurate, isn't it? Or
well, certainly McClellan has a deserved reputation for being overly causous and particularly in overestimating the strength of his opposition. And
no, McClellan was a copperhead. Everybody refuses to say this, but McClellan was a copperhead who didn't want to fight the war, who wanted to preserve the Union as is, because he was making money off of unpaid labor, just like everybody else in New York City. And that is unsaid. That is unsaid about the Civil War, is that the war itself was not North versus South. I mean, and you can see it in McClellan's own brain. He doesn't want to do this.
Did McClellan have financial interests with preserving like the Southern aristocracy? Like Tim mentioned New York.
Can't speak to that. Really can't speak
I
to
mean,
McClellan's
come on.
financial
That's
interests.
why the guy's in the army. But anyway.
The story I always got with McClellan was he was this Napoleon wannabe.
Right.
And he was so obsessed with his reputation and everything.
Yeah, the story is he's all very Napoleonic, but then he goes and runs against Lincoln in 1864 with Clement Vallandigham. Wasn't Clement Vallandigham on the ticket?
No, Clement Vallandigham was not on the ticket, but Clement Vallandigham wrote the platform of the Democratic Party, which called the war a mistake, and that was a big problem because
the war is a mistake. The greatest thing that America has ever done in the history of humanity, the greatest thing we've ever done, was a mistake.
I agree. The greatest thing we've ever done is
McClellan. That is the position McClellan ran on for president.
Yeah,
and that's how he ran the Army of the Potomac too. And none of these Civil War guys want to say that. All they want to say is, "Oh, McClellan was just slow and Napoleonic." Fuck you. Fuck you. Sorry.
Tim's firing shots.
We're gonna use
that's good.
Occasional profanity here.
Absolutely. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, but I think Willich would have agreed, right?
I don't want to speak for him, but certainly Willich believed that. As far as McClellan, are you asking?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know what I don't have any. Willich was in the Western Theater, McClellan's in the Eastern Theater, so they really don't have any contact other than very early. They did fight side by side very early on in what later became West Virginia, so he did have some exposure to him then.
These changes in the Army of the Potomac, or the command structure of the entire Union Army, like Hooker to Burnside, all that shit, Meade, Grant. Did he ever have any opinion on that?
Well, he certainly did. I mean, he wrote a whole pamphlet in 1866 on his opinions, and he had a lot of opinions on the officer class. For example, his basic philosophy was he wanted to have the future standing army of the United States, which had grown to immense proportions during the Civil War. He wanted that to be a citizen army, almost like the model in Israel these days, right? So he wanted a citizen army with mandatory service for a period of years. He had great disrespect for West Point and West Point trained officers as a class. So certainly,
because he's going with this Prussian training, right? He's drilling these dudes with this Prussian manual, and he's like, "Fuck that West Point manual."
Right. And so he has a completely different view of how the military ought to be structured. So, but and I will say he had some, of course, major run-ins with Hooker just after the war concerning, and that story's in the book also, about the last Confederate executed.
That's
was under his
tragic story.
It's a terrible story, but so he certainly has personal animus against Hooker. He has a general disregard for West Point officers as a class. However, and he has occasional run-ins with his superiors when he questions their aptitude or their talents. However, he always comes. They have a fight. They have disagreements. He was relieved of his command for a few weeks here and there, but he always comes back and respects the chain of command, and that, I think, had been drilled into him during his Prussian army training. So he's not like Siegel, Franz Siegel, who resigns like 3 or 4 times. Because of this conflict between Siegel's ego and the chain of command. So Willich doesn't go there. So despite these differences, which he airs after the war, he always respects the chain of command. So
yeah, he's a good soldier. At the end of the day, like you said, he's been drilled with the Prussian military doctrine his entire life. He's a good soldier, and he might have disagreements or whatnot, but he's still going to be respectful of the command structure.
So we are now well over an hour. What do you think? You want to do this again, David?
Yeah, I'll do it again. Why not?
I mean, we're just scratching the surface here.
Yeah.
Can I touch on one thing before we go, though?
Sure.
I want to ask, we talked about Garibaldi last time, and these 1848ers are incredible and inspiring in so many ways. You got Thomas Marr, and that's how you say his name, correct?
Yeah,
and,
Marr, right.
Yes. Willich, Franz Siegel, all of these, Garibaldi, all these people. You touch on the book that he wrote more to this guy named Manzini. It seems more, it seems more than Garibaldi.
Now you're thinking of Henry Mancini, who wrote the score for A Breakfast at Tiffany's.
I don't think that's the one.
Right. Mazzini is a different Italian.
Yeah. Please explain, because the Italian-German connection here is such an interesting synthesis of two different revolutions. Can you touch more on that?
Sure. Mazzini really, you could call Mazzini the political father, say, of Italian republicanism, where Garibaldi might be the military father of Italian Republic, if you want to oversimplify it. So Mazzini would be to the Italian Republic would be almost like George Washington is to the American Republic. That's it.
Never heard of him, and I'm Italian. I mean,
yeah, you should know more about this guy.
Like the rage just flows forth. I mean,
oh my God!
I'm supposed to worship this guy named Columbus, who ain't even Italian, who took a wrong turn and ended up on the wrong spot in the world. I'm supposed to worship that guy, but I don't know anything about this Mazzini. So please carry on about Mazzini.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on Mazzini, but I wanted to answer Jonathan's questions about what's up with this German-Italian connection, because Willich on at least 2 occasions is on the verge of going to Italy or Sicily and fighting in the Italian Revolution when the German Revolution stalls. So the point here, I think, is not a German-Italian connection per se. The point is a pan-European radical Republican movement, small r.
You called it, you cited the Arab Spring as a compromise.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what's really going on here. So Willich is at this point sees himself as many of these people do, like for example, Mazzini starts young Italy, that becomes young Europe, right? So this is really the vision here, is eventually an entirely different system without such artificial political borders, right? This is about a brotherhood of man. This isn't about Italians and Germans and such. And maybe that's a little naive given how strong some of these ethnic heritages are in the different countries and states of Europe in the 19th century, but that's where they were coming from. So you see this fluidity between the radicals moving from France. Look at Marx, for example. France, Belgium, Germany, Switzerland, London. I mean, these guys consider themselves as European radicals, not so much as.
I think the Arab Spring comparison is apt. I mean, that is exactly what it feels like when you're looking back at it. And I'm a Gen Xer. By the way, we got a boomer, we got a millennial, and we got Gen
Right.
X on this
Perfect.
podcast. That's fucking great. So
Yeah.
none of us could have known this comparison until the Arab Spring happened, because we don't have anything to compare to this multinational, worldwide uprising against people.
Authoritarianism. Yeah.
So that's the best comparison to me. And when you look at it, you got Marr, Willich, Mazzini, Garibaldi. I'm sure I'm going to miss a bunch of Polacks are going to be mad at me for missing the Polish guy.
Hungarians.
I mean,
Oh,
Kossuth.
oh my God,
Kossuth
Hungarians.
is the Hungarian, and didn't Kossuth went on this huge tour of the United States.
That's right. Yeah.
Just like Willich did.
Who?
Kossuth.
Kossuth.
Who's he?
He's the Hungarian.
Look him up.
What?
Yeah, he's the he's the
part
Hungarian.
I wanted to ask about this because you mentioned it last episode that the Hungarians played a role in the Civil War and whatnot. You literally said Hungarians. Please, like, elaborate more, because
you don't know who Kossuth is. So what are we going to say?
I think here's what I'll say. Here's what I'll say. I'll say that we talked about textbooks last time, right? So, and what we learned in textbooks and we didn't learn about textbooks. I mean, let's just call it what it is. There has been a pervasive anti-immigrant bias in this country going way, way back to the 19th century, right? So this is something that continues to happen. So it's not surprising that we don't know about these Hungarians and these Canadians, for example, these people from all these different countries who not only in the Civil War, but also in the Revolutionary War. I mean, think about it. You had Baron von Steuben, right, from the German states. You had Lafayette from France.
American hero.
Kosciuszko is the Polish guy.
Exactly.
I learned about Kosciuszko, but I didn't learn about anybody since, except when the Pope became Catholic and Polish.
Right.
At the same time.
So that's a big. That's a big current in today's historical scholarship is studying these, and in this case, these transatlantic or transnational revolutionaries, right? So let's not look at the Civil War as this event that just happened in between the North and the South as a sectional conflict in the U.S. I mean, this is a much part of a much broader international revolution, and you can look back to 1776 and say that that 1776 happens, and then the French Revolution happens, and I mean, so there was a certain aspect of this globalism going on for some time. It was a global world, not to the extent it is now, but certainly in the 19th century. I mean, you have the telegraph coming along. I mean, news starts to travel faster. You have the ability to travel between countries like these radicals did all over Europe. So there is a much more of an international aspect to this. So when the American Civil War breaks out, it's not only an opportunity for these radicals to finally act out their ambitions in terms of making the world a better place in destroying slavery, act out these ambitions in America. It's not only about doing that, but it's in some ways looked at as perhaps one of the last chances to preserve this whole idea of Republican popular government, because what has just happened before the American Civil War. I mean, France has had a couple republics by this time, and at this time, they're basically an empire again, and Austria is an empire. Yada yada yada.
This is why the first international was a white and blue party.
Wow.
over the 1864 re-election of Abraham Lincoln.
And the precursor, one of the precursors, and I mentioned this just very briefly in the book, and you may not have even noticed it, but there is this movement in the 1850s, basically to create something along the lines of the First International, but it's almost a United States of the world using the
Yeah.
United States as a model. Doesn't go
We were
anywhere.
the best. Everybody loved us. They used to love
It
us.
doesn't.
I
It
mean,
doesn't go anywhere, but it kind of shows you
we were the best.
what
We were
what
the
the
best.
thinking
We were
of
the
was.
best. I mean,
You know,
this is all great to end the show on. So we've been on for about an hour and a half. You guys are great. So
all right.
David, we're happy to do this every week. Do you want to do this next week? What do you think?
Yeah, we can do it next week, but let's come up with a different angle. Why don't you come up with kind of a
I told you,
theme or
Danny,
topic?
the tropical flower.
That's not enough. No, we need something a little more substantial than that.
No, the tropical flower.
Every time I feel like we come back to, like, every time, the 2 times we've done this,
Yeah.
but every time I'm forced to come back to the international aspect of this being a global conflict, and it incorporating all these different nationalities and all these strands into one synthesis. And then what you said makes perfect sense, because at that time period, we're the last one standing. Like you said, France has fallen, Louis Napoleon, we all know how Willich felt about Louis Napoleon. Did not like him. And that goes to his stay in Bescant, I believe.
Besançon.
Yes.
Besançon, yeah.
Yes.
Hey, we'll talk about
He
Besançon
says-
next time. We're talking about Besançon. We're going to talk about this choir. I want to hear all about this choir.
Okay.
Yes, but
this
theme,
choir
yes,
shit is
the
great.
choir.
I want to hear all about the choir. There's a couple things also. I've heard that there might be some interest in some guests popping into your show from Minnesota.
Okay.
So
all right.
there might be that. Yogi, I've invited Yogi. I don't know if you could tell Yogi, hey, join us. I would love to have Yogi on this thing and talking.
Okay.
On a Saturday night. Anybody else? But your PhD guy, we got to have that guy.
All right. I will see what I can do about that. He's, the time. Well, the time change is big, right? So, I mean, if we go on at 3, my time, I think that's close to midnight his time. So, yeah. So we'll have to work on that.
Are you going for your walk with your wife after this?
No, I'm having dinner. We already went for our walk. It's 71 degrees here, by the way.
Oh, God.
That's wonderful.
Just thought I'd rub that in.
Yeah, you should, because we got a foot of snow this week.
Yeah, it was bad. We got hammered.
We got hammered.
All right. All your viewers are checking out at this point, Tim.
Well, the viewers, whoever you are, thank you for listening to the Ghosts of Plum Run August Willich Hour, where you come for the charge that saved America, but stay for the reddest of the red. David Dixon, author of August Willich, Radical Warrior, German Revolutionary to Union General. Thank you for joining us again. We will see you next Saturday. Are we on for next Saturday?
We're on, baby.
All right, let's go.
Do it.
Later.
All right. See ya. Bye.